Well, it's Friday the 3rd of May. Mercury's time in Aries seems to have caused a lot of straight and sharp attention on things. This period ends on May the 6th. However, its influence has certainly been felt. This is episode 1908 of 301 Permanently Moved Online, a personal podcast 301 seconds in length, written, recorded, and edited in 1 hour by me, at J. A little over a year ago, I made episode 1805 on experience. It prompted quite a few conversations with friends and acquaintances, as it was one of the most honest pieces of media I've put out on the internet. In it, I talked about how I feel conversations play out, and sometimes have shapes appear in my mind's eye. I spoke about the way a good conversation makes me feel like I'm running behind a ball racing erratically down a hill. But it was the last thing that surprised people that I know the most, that I no longer experience myself inside my head. At some point in 2017, I moved down from perceiving myself as being behind my eyes inside my head and started to experience the world in a more embodied way. I am the tips of my fingers, the end of my toes, etc. Outlandish claims to be sure, but all true. In episode 5 last year, I stressed that believing in the possibility of what someone is saying about their experience of the world without requesting proof is a skill like active listening that can be exercised and built like a muscle, and I'd like to exercise that muscle again with you today. Twitter user Gordon Fang posted recently that Wittgenstein argued, amongst other things, that superficial grammatical similarities in the forms of both religious and factual statements mislead us into believing that they are fundamentally identical states of belief. It is exactly this problem of language that leads Western quote-unquote empirical atheists into all kinds of loops, as they like to dissolve the distinction between the two. They end up conflating in believing in gravity to be the same thing as belief in Christ or whatever, and they get mad about it. Instead of the loaded word belief, let's instead use the word knowing. For example, many people intellectually know that they are going to die one day, but they don't actually know that they are going to die. It's not something they have come to terms with and therefore fear it. There is a shift or internalization of what happens when you move from intellectually knowing something to knowing something. It is difficult to explain in words if you haven't experienced this shift before, but the word epiphany gets close, and you'll just have to trust me on that. When my perception of myself moved down into my body, it caused all kinds of craziness. I thought maybe all this meditation had made me go mad. I can't exactly go to the doctor and say, Doctor, I no longer perceive the world from inside my head." It sounds like the opening of some weird joke. Perhaps it was some weird joke. Anyway, what happened was many of my regular meditation practices became new again. I had developed a changed perspective or who or what it is that was doing the experiencing. I struggled a long time with this new perspective daily on the mat, and then something else happened. Like an epiphany, I realized that your consciousness does not spawn into the world like a character in a video game. You do not enter this world as a spark of consciousness. You emerge from it. This shift in perspective broke me. Everywhere I looked, I suddenly saw the world in a constant state of emergence. The river flowing past me, the trees outside the window are just trees doing their tree thing. Dogs are just being dogs in the park, all emerging from one moment to the next like a tapestry or a stream in flow. But it was the other people going about just peopling in the world that weirded me out the most. Eventually, this perspective just merged into daily life, and it was no longer alien, just fact. But as this happened, all sorts of other problems emerged. One morning, earlier this year, after a long session on the mat, I thought I was having a genuine psychotic break. I was walking around my flat, and I no longer believed in linear time. I was making a cup of tea, knowing that there was no past or future, only now. The state of emergence around me had taken over completely. And when I'm going about my life, there is only now. Everything is going through a process I can only describe as unfolding. The universe doesn't move linearly forward like the bar on an MP3 player showing the track's progress. Time isn't external in this way. Our experience of life is like a growing flower, constantly opening its petals and blossoming for all of eternity. As the world unfolds around us, it gives us the perception of movement. The perception of this forward motion of time is a misexperiencing of the momentum of the world unfolding around you. All of this came to me as I stood waiting for the kettle to boil. It's quite frankly changed my life. I'm a lot happier than I was about the state of the world in a kind of Gnostic sense, and I'm excited to see what I experience next. And besides, I can't exactly go to the doctor and say, Doctor, my experience of linear time has changed, but I can talk about it on a podcast. I suppose.